Hello and welcome to Cliff Reviews Art House. This time I'm providing a bit of an overview to Aster's 3 films, and as part of that I'll consider whether I was wrong in my previous review of Beau is Afraid. Aster has made 3 films. I'd only seen Beau is Afraid and I gave it a pretty bad review when I saw it a couple of years ago. I always intended to catch up on his other films, Midsommar and Hereditary. I'd heard lots of positive things about them both, and I don't quite know how I missed them. A friend was recently raving about Midsommar and she told me that I had to see it, so this provided the prompt to watch it. I enjoyed it a lot more than Beau is Afraid, so I was keen to catch up on Hereditary too. Clearly, Aster is a very talented filmmaker, so after enjoying Hereditary and Midsommar, I thought I really should give Beau is Afraid a second viewing. It's not uncommon that I find that my view changes on a second viewing, and it is interesting to compare with his other 2 films, given that they're both held in high regard by many. Let's do them in the order that they were released. Firstly, Hereditary. This is a gripping and properly scary horror film. It's got a great atmosphere, it's really well made, exciting cinematography. I loved the use of the models motif. It adds layers of surrealism, blending reality and intricate and slightly obsessive model-like construction. I wasn't fully satisfied by the ending, but this is often the case for me with horror films. The build-up is often better than the resolution. If I was to make a criticism of it, I do think this is an effective and engaging horror film, but it lacks deeper metaphors or humour. It leans heavily into pure horror, which makes it less interesting for me. It was a really good debut film though. Next is Midsommar. This, for me, is a really engaging folk horror film. It's visually stunning. It blends a quirky, abstract story with humour, with unsettling rituals, with richly layered narrative. It's much more satisfying than Hereditary, which I did find to be a bit surface level. There's deeper meanings in Midsommar. There's exploration of themes like trauma, relationships, cults and mental illness. The story is really compelling. The bright, summery aesthetic contrasts with the dark, violent undertones, and the soundtrack really amplifies this tension. Despite its 2.5-hour runtime, the film never felt boring. There are obvious similarities to the iconic The Wicker Man, but it never felt derivative. This film has style, substance and originality. So we come back to my second viewing of Beau is Afraid. I didn't look back at my review from almost 2 years ago. I tried to approach it fresh, genuinely curious whether I was going to have a different experience after enjoying his other 2 films. I find Beau is Afraid quite frustrating. Some things about it are brilliant. It is absolutely fantastic, while other things about it are really trying and disappointing. Looking back at my review after I watched it, I still felt exactly the same. This is easily my least favourite of his 3 films. The film is visually super imaginative. There are really creative sets. The cinematography is amazing. I loved the opening and the depiction of the city. This world is really scary and strange. I must say all 3 Aster films are really well made. He's a really proficient, quite brilliant filmmaker. But in Beau is Afraid there are major flaws, I think. The 3-hour running time is just too excessive. It looks great and at times it is really engaging, but at many times I just found it really tedious. The problem I have is that it's really one note. For me, it is a fantastic portrayal of paranoia and mental illness. It's absolutely brilliantly done. A little too real for my liking. Some of my mental health quirks chime with this depiction. It's really effective. There's excellent camera work, and at one level this is super exciting filmmaking. But there's no let-up in this. We're constantly inside Beau's mental illness. There's no relief in it whatsoever. I don't think we come out of his mental illness once. I don't really see the point of doing this. I think there's an interesting comparison here with David Lynch. Aster is creating nightmarish, surrealist worlds like Lynch, but in Lynch's case, he balances the surreal with grounded moments, with character depth and with layered subtext. This balance allows for a richer exploration of themes, whereas Beau is Afraid appears to lack that variety. The whole film is locked in the nightmare framework right through to the final scene. In the end, for me, this is a massive flaw in the film. Even for 1.5 hours, I would have had an issue with it. But to sit through 3 hours of this is just really problematic. This does feel like a therapy session, and in this way, it feels overly self-indulgent. There's no emotional depth to the film either because it's all in the nightmare. Clearly, there are really interesting themes here. Guilt, toxic memory, repression, they all dominate, but they just lack real traction. The performance of Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic, but it's confined to this kind of one-note confusion. And ultimately, the film feels like a shallow, therapy-like exercise, stylish but lacking substance. I think I enjoyed it more than the first time. I was really able to appreciate its strengths in terms of the things that it does do well. I remember finding the theatre scene in the woods really tedious the first time, but this was the scene that I most changed my opinion on this time. It's really interesting in a kind of meta sense. The theatre breaks the fourth wall and involves the audience, and he's in the audience, and then he realises that they're acting out his story. The scene where he meets the 3 men that might be his sons is actually really moving. It's fascinating in a play within the play sense, the meta aspects. We know that it's a dream within the dream, but there's actually something really authentic about that scene, what it would be like to meet your sons if that was really taking place. So, comparing the 3 Ari Aster films, Midsommar is definitely my favourite. It's great. I don't really have any criticisms of it. It's quirky, it's compelling, and it's got a fantastic performance by Florence Pugh. I really enjoyed Hereditary. It's a super scary horror film, really effective, but it felt a little bit shallow compared to Midsommar. Beau is Afraid is by far my least favourite of the 3 films. Many things about it are great, but it's deeply flawed because of this one-note mental illness confusion. Watching all 3 films effectively back to back, there are some commonalities. I think he does have a creative and unique style. He definitely has something about houses with attics. He also has something about people who act calm when terrible things are happening. Things that absolutely are not normal, but where the other people act as if they are. That sense of paranoia where you wonder if you're mad because no one else is reacting to this unbelievable thing. Overall, despite major problems with Beau is Afraid, I have to say that I think Aster is a great filmmaker, and I will really look forward to seeing his next film. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.